welcome to episode 14 of Divine Superconductor Radio. Today I'm interviewing my friend John Schott. He is a fascinating individual that has a very similar journey to mine with veganism and keto. He's tried a lot of the same things that I have, and we've both gotten really deep into magnesium and body work and really trying to prioritize what to focus on to stay in balance in this modern world where there's so many factors throwing us out of balance. So in this interview, we talk a lot about vitamin A, retinol, retinoic acid. We talk about vitamin D, specifically in the context of supplementation. We talk about carotenoids a lot. And then near the end, we talk about body work. And I really like John's perspective. Throughout this interview, there's so many cool little nuggets of practical, applicable information that you can apply to your life. And that's really the focus of this podcast, is to not just promote products and sell stuff, although it supports the show. It's mainly to share free, simple things and just give you another perspective, because there aren't many people talking about the toxicity or potential toxicity of vitamin A and vitamin D supplementation or carotenoid supplementation. Astaxanthin, high doses. A lot of people are doing that. Probably not the best thing for the human body. So you guys will love this one. Enjoy. All right, welcome to the show, John Schott.
Hey man, how's it going, man? Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. How long have we known each other? Like 4 or 5 years now?
More or less, yeah, more or less. It's been that long, yeah.
Yeah, we've been messaging back and forth on Facebook over the years, and it's funny to watch your journey because it's parallel to mine. You did the vegan vegetarian thing. You've studied light water magnetism, EMFs.
Yep.
We studied a lot of the same stuff, so it's pretty cool. But you've been studying Adam Bergstrom and Ray Peat, I think, longer than I have. Took me a while to catch up.
yeah, no, that's cool. Mostly Adam Bergstrom, some of the Ray Peat stuff as well. Yeah, Adam, I've heard him first on One Radio Network, and I've been listening to Patrick's show for almost 11 years, man. And he's had him from the get-go. And he was one of the first people who the lipofuscinosis and the whole omega-3 thing came out of, and like in Adam Bergstrom fashion, man, he just spins your head into a different direction and gets you going, man, and into diving deep into something. So yeah, totally.
So how long have you been into natural health? How did your journey begin? Well,
very similar to you. I've been at this almost 11 years, and it did start with the whole raw vegan thing. I was looking for self-improvement, and I went to New York to get into film and acting. And in New York, in that world, I got into like some modeling stuff and all that. And man, that world was really heavy. And I encountered some really uncomfortable things in that industry. And I was like, that's not for me. So thankfully, at the same time as I was doing that, I was playing around with a lot of Tony Robbins things. And one of the first things that caught my attention was the whole alkaline thing and getting more alkaline. And so I don't know, it was something interesting. I've never heard of that before. So I decided to just kind of go that way. And that led me into raw vegan. And I started working in New York with Dr. David Jubb at that time. And man, that was super interesting. That was super interesting. So from there, you know, it's been like very similar to yours. It's been an evolution of layers upon layers of discovery with this. And a lot of it has been, you know, difficult, you know, growing pains and realizations that I went through many experiences that were very extreme. And I hurt myself in many occasions doing way too much of the nutritional, like what we call nutritional fasting or super fasting, juicing, you know, extreme diets. I mean, imagine I'm in New York City. I'm a guy who grew up in South America all my life, never seen snow. I get to New York, first time I see snow, it's freezing cold. And I'm a raw foodist, man. and I'm like so like into it, and it's just like, this is the thing that's going to save humanity and all this stuff. And behind closed doors, my body was craving saturated fat and was craving things, and I didn't want to listen to it. So what happens is that you start binging on stuff because it gets to a point where you can't control yourself. It's like, so I would go to the corner, eat the worst food, like, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and I would take down 2 pints of that stuff, and then I would feel horrible after that, and guilty and all this stuff. It's like, why did I do that? It was almost like a self-sabotage thing. And then the next day I said, okay, I'm going to start clean again. I'm going to do my juices again, and I'm going to do the salads and all this stuff in freezing weather, man. And it just wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy at all. So from there, it just evolved. I came back to Miami and started making foods and a couple of things at a farmer's market, trying out, some of the things that I learned, and it evolved into a restaurant. And by the time I got to the restaurant, I started playing around more with ideas around the paleo diet, ancestral diets, Western price, and all these different things that made a little bit more sense and became something that's more, became a little bit more complete, less extreme. Even though I did keep on experimenting with extreme things like super low carb and keto. I mean, I was doing ketogenic diets before this whole keto thing was super popular, way back when. And that one didn't last too long, because my metabolism does not run on a ketogenic diet. That's like completely awful. I felt horrible on that. So after a while, you get to a point where you're very balanced, and you fine tune everything. And throughout this whole process, I studied iridology. I've studied hair tissue analysis. I've studied with a lot of brilliant people. I got into the Jack Cruz stuff too, like we were talking about before, light water magnetism. That one was pretty great, a pretty great discovery, because it's one of the things that we're, facing today that's huge. The electromagnetic frequencies, the light, all these things, non-native EMFs, and all these other components. So that one opened up another world of focusing a lot on lifestyle. I did learn a lot from Pristine Hydro and Glenn over there in California. A lot of that was, the importance of water and magnesium and the body work and all that stuff. So throughout this whole period, I'm working with clients here in Miami, and some online and things like that. But I've been, creating my own approach to all these things and putting all these pieces together to form protocols that are nature-based, but also taking into account the realities of the world today. So, that's a little bit about where I've come from the last 11 years. And I love it, man. I still love it today. I loved it way back when, because my passion has always been to help people, to serve people, serve humanity. And I have a family of my own, and that's played an integral part of my journey as well. Because like we were talking a little bit before we started about kids and about, being a parent, man, that just completely changes you, like in a completely different way. So that's a part of what I've done for growth and to become a little bit wiser than I was way back when in the raw food vegan days, where I thought I knew everything, like I had all the answers, it's like, but we go through it, man. We go through it, and it's a nice evolution. So yeah.
That's awesome, man. No, that was great. We're definitely kindred spirits, and I was fruitarian. I think maybe you saw me at the end of that journey. I was fruitarian for 3 years and did the ketogenic thing. And that's the thing I noticed right now is fruitarianism and ketogenic diets are really, really popular. And it's interesting because those might be beneficial short term, right? Like in conditions of neurodegeneration, maybe Alzheimer's, which is what I think ketosis was originally designed for. Or fruitarianism during the summer, right? But it's just when people do these chronically, like these long stretches, it's not compatible with human physiology.
Yeah, it's not. And I think part of the reason that I think I've stepped back and tried to analyze why is it that we gravitate towards these extreme processes, right? It's because we live in an extreme scenario in our lives in general. Our society is going through a lot, and then through the industrialization of the food supply and just the world in general, if you step back and you see that paradigm, you see that it's very extreme too. So you go to a SAD diet or a standard American diet or something that's coming from a factory farm, which is horrible. And you see what they're doing to the crops, genetically modifying food, spraying, and all this stuff. You start to think, well, this is very extreme, and this is not very natural either. So, then if we're humans that have a heart and a soul, and we want to try to make the world a better place, and we see that that's an extreme scenario, then sometimes we go, well, we need an extreme solution to that. And sometimes short term, like a fruitarian thing or a raw food thing for a detox may work for some people. Even a keto thing might work for some people. But that extreme quote unquote solution doesn't necessarily mean it's a sustainable long term plan. So that's part of where I've seen there's a lot of growth and a lot of potential to come out of that and just be a little bit more balanced, and put things in context, right? This is funny because years back I wrote like a PDF. I think it was titled "The No Diet," the I'm not going to write a diet book PDF, something like that. Because I have tons of material to write a diet book, right? But I refuse to write a diet book because even the word diet comes with a negative connotation if you see the first three letters, right? But besides that, I mean, for the past however many years, we've seen diet books left and right? And people are still having issues. So, going back to the idea of the whole diet and the extremes, it just doesn't work long term, So that's one of the reasons why I've decided that context is extremely important. So if I was ever to write a diet book, it would be called The Context Diet, which is not a book about dieting at all. It's just about look, there's different factors here. Are you a child? Are you an old person? More elderly person who's more, needs a different kind of approach? Do you have less hydrochloric acid? Where do you live? What's your intention around, let's say, exercise? Because some people want to train hard. There's all these different elements that have to be taken into consideration. So that whole thing about everybody should be fruitarian, everybody should be keto, everybody should be this and that doesn't work. And we know that. We know that intuitively, and we know that just out of the fact that it hasn't worked, it's failed. So that's kind of where I come from now. And I try to bring context into the equation, especially when I'm working with groups, and especially when I'm working with people one-on-one and all these different things. And fortunately, people like us, we've always had our finger on the pulse when it comes to all these things related to health. And we've learned a lot. So we have a lot to offer to people in that sense. And I think putting everything in the sense that the context, is important. I think it's very valuable. It's very valuable. Just to put an end to it, to that point, in all these years of me working with people, I've noticed that there's those extremes, right? The keto on one side, high fat, low carb. You got the other extreme with high carb, low fat, and then you have most everybody stuck in the middle, which is where most of us navigate, right? Like intuition and study and all that. I know that I function more with, let's say, and I don't even count calories or anything like that, but I know that intuitively I do great with a 40% carbohydrate, 30%, protein and 25% fat. And that changes. Sometimes it'll be 50% carbohydrate. So more or less, that's kind of in the middle. That's my metabolism. My metabolism runs great on that. But then you get these extremes where you do have people who metabolically run great on fat. And then you do have people that on the other extreme metabolically run great on carbohydrates. But these tend to be the exceptions to the rule. So when they see that either by lottery, by default, or by sheer luck, they find their program that works amazing, they start, going off and just screaming, praises of these two programs and saying this is the answer for everybody. So we've matured. We've learned a lot from from the extremes and from not taking those extremes. So,
Well said, man. Yeah, I've heard it said recently, if you're happy, healthy, and horny, that's actually a good sign of health.
yeah, I heard that somewhere too. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and I think everyone's stressed out too, and that's what I have against these ketogenic or these extreme diets is like, as you said, all these stressors, and then we add another stressor, which is stressing about our food, right? It's like trying to restrict and be, orthorexic and worry about what we're putting in our mouth. That's more stressful than the actual food, right? If you go out to eat with your family or friends and it's probably not organic, it's like we have to be in a low stress state to properly digest and eliminate, right?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. In the search for the ultimate pure experience, we pretty much get blinded to the other factors that are extremely important, especially social things. How do you manage relationships? That's important. That's extremely important. The emotional component. I mean, I see it all the time when I work with clients on the bodywork on the table. The tissues when I'm like unlocking some cross-linked proteins and collagen, and I'm trying to shave off a little bit of excess calcium deposits in the crystals and things like that. There's pain that comes out, but with that pain comes out a lot of emotion, a lot of trapped emotion. So I get the full gamut of reactions from deep crying that's not physical, to purging, to laughing, to all kinds of just outpouring of things that get trapped in our bodies that don't belong there, that we don't need to hold on to. And it's beautiful, man. It really is beautiful. So it's a factor.
Have you seen on YouTube that video from Thomas Myers, Why Does Massage Hurt?
I think so. Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, he has a lot of really good stuff, man. The whole fascia element with anatomy trains and all that. And you know what? You look at him, and he looks like he's in good. He practices. He looks like he practices what he preaches. I think he's up there in early 70s. And with the videos that I've seen of him and all that, he's got really good mobility and all that stuff. So he must be doing something right on that end. So
yeah, for sure. He looks great. And that's the fascinating part to me about body work. And we both studied under Glenn Calkins in Laguna for a little bit. And that whole component of emotional trauma being sequestered or stored in the muscle and the fascia, and it hurt going in, so it's going to hurt coming out. That was like basically the summary of that Thomas Myers video. And that makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Really fascinating stuff. That speaks to the importance of getting body work done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of that. I put that as part of some of the foundational things nowadays, I've thought about that a little bit, because I was thinking, okay, body work, how did that, we always try to link things up to ancestral examples and things like that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, did our ancestor have to really do body work? Because a lot of the ideas behind body work nowadays, because we sit too long, our postures are not really great because of dysfunctional movement. A lot of it is because of the stuff we spray, and people are drinking high dissolved solid or hard water, things like that. And those are factors as to why we do body work nowadays. Emotion and stress and all that stuff, electromagnetic frequencies. Our ancestors didn't necessarily have that. But with what I've learned from trigger point therapy, our ancestors did do a lot of natural movement, and they went out hunting. At times, some of these hunting endeavors were pretty dangerous, I'm sure they were carrying heavy loads, when they hunted these animals. So I'm pretty sure, and who can prove this, right? But I'm pretty sure that there was a place for readjusting those muscle and the fascial lines of some of these hunters and some of these gatherers and things like that. And I'm sure they had some kind of innate, intuitive ability on how to do that. Now more than ever, well, you see it. You see it with the popularity of these bodywork tools and it's just, for lack of a better word, the guns, like the Hypervolt and things like that, dude, those things are selling like hotcakes. And I see it, my clients, sometimes I go to their houses to work on them and they have one of those things. So I'll use their Hyper tool and I'll teach them how to use them. And so I find it fascinating. I find it like when I do it, I do it as a practice. So I'll do body work on myself. I shoot for at least 3 times a week. And every time I do it, I sleep better. Every time I do it, my body's like, whoa, it just like completely just opens up, and it feels like very young, very supple, very elastic, so I can keep up with my kids, man. My kids are young and they're always on. So that's one of the things that keeps me like running and jumping around with them. So it's important for sure.
Do you think one of the best methods, I used to do, you go to a thrift store and you buy the walker, like the old person walker. Do you think that mashing style of body work, just using that to balance and have someone lie down on their stomach and just mashing their thighs and back, do you think that's a good entry point for most people with body work? Because I feel that every time I have that done. Absolutely.
Is it a good entry point? It depends. Like our good friend Adam Bergstrom would say, yes, no, maybe. because it's when we use the feet and the walker like Glenn does in California, that's no joke. It's a really profound, deep way of getting some of these calcium deposits and fibrosis and fascial adhesions and things like that to open up and release. But in the beginning, if it's somebody who is not used to that and it's somebody who's first being introduced to it, it might be too much too fast. So if they're the type of person that they want the results right away and let's do it no matter what, I'll go through it, it'll be perfect for them. But if there's somebody who's going to be turned off by it and they'll go down on the ground, get mashed real deep with that style of body work, they might get a little bit like, quote unquote, traumatized from the experience and they might get turned off. So it depends. I feel it out with people and I give people options. Some people might just need to start with a foam roller. A foam roller is gentle. You can do soft myofascial release if done correctly by just moving your feet while you're putting pressure on the tissues. And that fascial release, which is more of a slow myofascial release, is actually a good entry point to building a neurokinetic relationship as well, because you're also directing your brain to get signals. Hey, this is the way I was designed to function. We've gotten used to sitting and now we're comfortable with sitting too much, but hey, my hamstrings are short. And things that, my hip flexors are, shorter and not in the right kinetic chain and things like that. So the body, like us humans, when we're in our comfort zone, we want to protect and stay in that comfort zone. But sometimes our comfort zones are not the best thing for us. So when it comes to that, but I still use it. I still use the mashing. Actually, I taught my daughter how to use it so she can use it on me, because sometimes you need that. My daughter's 9 and she gets it. So she'll get the walker and she'll put all her weight on me and it feels amazing. It feels amazing. It goes away. That's the thing. The more you do it, the more that initial intense, quote unquote, pain. I don't like to call it pain too much, but because sometimes people are afraid of pain. But pain gives you a lot of clues to a lot of things. So it could be your friend too. But yeah, man, I get her, and I give her a little job. She teach her a little bit about money too. So it's cute, yeah. Man. My she's beautiful, man.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
What do you think about vibrating foam rollers? Because I have like the Hypervolt.
The Hypervolt. I like it. I think it's great. It gives you a different layer of fascial release as well. So they're all good, man. The Hypervolt's good. The lacrosse ball's good. What I like to tell people when it comes to stuff like that is that people have a misconception too when it comes to pain and body work, is that, look, my back is hurting and this and that. And a lot of times they get somebody to massage them and they try to focus on the area of the pain. And usually it's coming from somewhere else. Most of the time it will be coming from somewhere else. So to go back to the back pain, A lot of times it's coming from your glute, your hip flexors, releasing your hamstring and your quads. And people don't work on those. And I start with that. And some people hurt themselves a little bit when they try to push through the pain in the area that they're having pain in. So that's definitely something that I wanted to mention, because I want to, people who are like, hey man, these two guys talking about body work, this is really interesting. You know, and by the way, I have knee pain, or I have back pain, or my neck, you know, or something like that. That's definitely a recommendation I'm making. It's like, don't focus so much on the area, but what's connecting to that. And then look, let's talk about, now that we're on the area of that, on the subject of it, and we mentioned Adam too a little bit. Think of the color when you're having a pain on a certain area of your body. Think of the color and what comes up, and that color will have a relationship to the emotional component of that. And man, I ask my clients all the time, and it's pretty much on point all the time, and it's amazing. It's always cool. It's clues to that. You can discover that emotional component as well. So it's fun, man. It's truly something that's awesome. I love it.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I found Adam Bergstrom's color recycling YouTube video, and it just goes through all the colors. And I think he even wears different colored clothing for different days of the week, like going through the chakras, starting with Monday red and then going up.
Actually, you got the right color on today. You're wearing yellow. I usually do that sometimes too. Right now I'm wearing green because my yellow shirt got destroyed by one of my kids. I need to get another yellow shirt. But it's fun, man. It doesn't hurt. You know, It can sound wacky to some people, you know, but hey, you know, we talk a lot about light, right? And we talk a lot about frequencies and all this stuff. All these colors have frequencies. So is it that crazy and that far-fetched that maybe on a Monday, which is linked up to the colors of the rainbow and the frequencies of the light prism, is it that far-fetched that maybe wearing some of that color that day could give you, you know, a boost of something? You don't know. We don't know, but hey, it doesn't hurt. So, you know, I do it most of the time too. You know, I wear green on Thursdays, yellow on Wednesday, you know, orange or brown on Tuesdays. It's fun. So.
Yeah. I think I have like 4 books on light, 4 or 5. And I think it was in Lieberman's book, Light, Medicine of the Future. Okay. They talked about painting prisons, different colors. And I think they painted some prison walls pink, and they noticed so much percentage decrease in aggression. So colors, I mean, just seeing them definitely affect our mental state and emotional state.
Absolutely. And look, just as an aside, we were talking about my kids, right? Well, my kids primarily go to like a Steiner school, like a Waldorf type school. And you see their classrooms, and depending on the grade level and the developmental stage of the child, the colors of the classrooms are different. And they go by a different phase and a different stage. So these kids they're half of the time they're outside. That's one of the reasons I love the school here that my kids are going to. So they're outside, they're doing gardening, they're doing knitting, they're doing a lot of play outside and all this stuff. But when they are inside, their environment, number one, is completely open. It has a lot of windows, so a lot of light comes in. But the colors of the classrooms and everything in the design is completely predicated on the growth and on the growth and the stage of where they are in their lives. So there's something to say about color, man. And it's not by chance that all this photobiomodulation and red light therapy is going off too, man. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
Yeah, for sure, man. My first podcast episode, I interviewed hypoallergenic air, and we gave all these air recommendations of free things people could do. And what I haven't talked about on my podcast yet is having a window open in your space. Like I have my window in my cabin here open all day. Even the car window cracked, just allowing those natural frequencies of light through that get blocked by the glass can make a huge difference in your home throughout the day. Yeah. Like, it's amazing that people spend their whole day with just their windows closed completely. They wonder why they're depressed.
Yeah. It's a thing, man. We were talking a little bit about, you know, the idea of rewilding, right? That's that little subtle thing you just mentioned about opening up a window letting the natural light in, letting fresh air in, opening up the doors with a screen if you don't want mosquitoes to come in or whatever, that's a way of rewilding. That gets us connected to nature. And at the end of the day, that's one of the things that motivates me with my work is it's nature based. I'm taking into consideration the fact that, we live a life that's very departed from nature, especially if you live in a city, like Miami, which that's one of the things that I need to deal with myself. But I have a great backyard. Most of the time I'm back there when I'm taking calls and when I'm playing with my kids, I'm getting grounded. So bringing these natural pillars of nature into your home somehow. And that was a great episode on air quality. I learned a lot from that one. And that's a big factor. What kind of air are we breathing? Do we have plants inside? So if we are going to spend time inside, we better make sure the air inside our homes is clean and it's the right, it's got the right elements to provide some of that natural frequency and that natural, quote unquote medicine that we get just from being outside. So absolutely.
Awesome, man. I want to go back to something you were talking about before with hunting and the connection with omega-3s, because there's so many different theories on what built the human brain.
Yeah.
And you have the drug Terrence McKenna people saying it was magic mushrooms. And then you have people saying it was coastal regions and we ate a lot of seafood and especially oysters and mollusks and fish. And it was the DHA, which I don't personally believe. Yeah. And then you have people that say it was hunting ruminant animals, and the saturated fats and all the nutrition in there and the amino acids. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that, because I think we've come to the same place in our understanding that polyunsaturated or specifically highly unsaturated fatty acids like PUFA, omega-3s are actually harmful to health, even from a natural source like seafood. It's more the selenium, the zinc, the copper that everyone's deficient in, and what gives us the benefits of the seafood.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially with the polyunsaturated element and DHA and all that good stuff, or not so good stuff in this case. I think, so, man, that's a tough one because like you mentioned, I've looked into some of these areas of like where our brain expanded and all this. And I think one of the leading hypotheses with this that resonates somewhat, I think there's two main ones that resonate, at least for me. One is there was a point, and I think I heard this from Jack Cruz. So, you know his bias, but part of it makes sense. He said something along the lines of like 600 million years ago, the UV exposure from the sun shifted. So that's when I think he said something along the lines of a third more complex kingdom started to appear on the earth, which allowed for the evolution of the current human to happen. So I don't want to misquote him or anything like that, but I think that element of the UV light and the behavior of the sun transforming in its own cycle of growth had something to do with it. Now, I think that also has something to do with the element of fire and how cooking our food, which is probably one of the ones that makes the most sense. And anthropologically, and I want to say I'm not an anthropologist, I've studied some of this stuff, but that's one of the ones that I think has a lot of weight into how our brains became the way they are now, which goes in line with our guts shrinking as well. We're not, a lot of, you hear this more in the vegan world that, hey, gorillas, eat only plant food. Look how strong they are. Yeah, but you look at their guts and they have a processing facility to kind of start to break down that plant material, which we don't have anymore. We're not gorillas. We're not bonobos. So, I don't want to get too much into that because, I think we're past that. But I think the element of cooking our food and hunting these big ruminant animals and being able to extract full nutrition and amino acids and the full spectrum of the collagen and the ability to pre-digest this food by cooking, I think that had a big bearing effect, a positive effect in our brains growing to the way they are now. So definitely that's something that's a big factor there. And you know what's funny about the whole, fish and marine hypothesis? I go, I'm from South America, and I lived a little bit in Costa Rica and South America. And when you start to see what the locals eat, you start to get if you coming from that nutrition trying world and trying in the modern nutritionism and all that stuff, and science based bias, you start to get a little bit confused, because most of these locals, with that, even when they live close to the coast, most of them are not eating fish. They're usually not eating fish. They're usually eating either a lot of them eat rice and beans, but a lot of them, when it comes to protein, are eating either chicken, pork. They're eating, grass-fed beef in the case of places like Costa Rica, where they're not doing factory farming and things like that. And it makes you wonder, like, wait a minute, these people are living by the ocean. They have plenty of ocean to fish and collect, seafood and things like that, but they hardly ever eat this stuff, so it makes you kind of think, right? There is something to this omega-3 thing, and there's something to the whole vitamin A thing that I've been that we can talk a little bit about that too, because a lot of these, like, quote unquote traditional diets, and a lot of people like to talk about, the blue zones and stuff and things like that, which I don't get too hung up on that. But if you start to see what they're eating, the whole idea and paradigm of eat the rainbow, eat the full color of the rainbow thing, kind of goes down a little bit down by the wayside. Because if you start to look at their diet, they're eating white potatoes, they're eating root vegetables, which typically are white, they're eating rice, they're eating beans, they're eating protein for the most part. A lot of times they're not eating kale salads. A lot of times they're not eating kale chips. And a lot of times they're not eating super high carotenoid or those super colorful foods that have a lot of this concentrates of vitamin A, which in the modern world, like, we can go into it a little bit more, because that's a controversial thing too now. And I've looked into it, because a lot of the things the layers that I'm peeling around this whole vitamin A as maybe it's not a vitamin, it's more of a toxic, has been coming. And I have to thank Dr. Garrett Smith for this, because this guy, he's a naturopath from Arizona. And man, I've learned so much from him. He's to me, when it comes to the world of hair tissue analysis, this guy's on another league. He sees patterns differently. And the way he's using hair tissue analysis is, to me, is pretty much superior than most other people. And other people are doing great jobs with it, don't get me wrong. But Garrett he's picking out some of the patterns and some of the relationships between the minerals, vitamin D and vitamin A now, that a lot of people are not looking into. That to me are presenting a lot of answers to things that we haven't been able to kind of put our finger on, like autoimmune diseases and skin issues, colitis and things like that. If you start to think, what's in vitamin A that may be something that we should start to look into, at least be open-minded to it, right? Because everybody says, well, vitamin A is an essential nutrient. It's an essential vitamin that's extremely important for eye health and for epithelial, for your blood and things like that. But then there's the other part of chronic vitamin A, for lack of a better word, concentration poisoning or excessive amounts that the liver doesn't process correctly, right? And you see this in an extreme way with the term hypervitaminosis A, which is a really rapid, excessive amount of vitamin A, let's say when somebody eats polar bear liver. And you've seen examples of people that have eaten polar bear livers or have supplemented excessive amounts of vitamin A, and they either die or get into serious issues with that. But then you start to think, well, let me think about, if that happens to that extreme, is there a possibility that there is a chronic, slow accumulation of that vitamin A or retinol or retinoic acid, which retinoic acid is basically the byproduct of retinol being broken down into an inflammatory constituent. That's the end product, basically, and that's very inflammatory. And the body, the liver is supposed to make what's called retinol binding protein, and that naturally. So because in nature we would come across some of the things that naturally would have vitamin A or at least carotenoids, and the liver is supposed to be able to handle that naturally, right? Especially if it's building properly retinol binding protein. But what happens when you have a zinc deficiency, a vitamin E deficiency, or you're not eating enough essential amino acids, or you're not eating enough protein, which is a thing. Nowadays, there's a lot of people who are not eating complete proteins, and they're not, or at least they're not breaking them down because of low stomach acid and other factors. When those things factor in, the body doesn't produce enough retinol binding protein, and that vitamin A or retinol or retinoic acid that's supposed to be flushed out of the body appropriately starts to not be able to be broken down. It starts to get accumulated in the liver. So what happens is that if the liver starts to be saturated with retinoic acid or retinol, and it doesn't flush it out, it starts spilling into the blood. And that's when people start getting a lot of issues with it. So I'll give you one of the introductory things which is fascinating to me is, what do they use in cosmetics as chemical peels, basically, to peel their skin for beautifying and all this stuff, right? They're using retinoic acid. So if that's peeling your skin on the outside, if your body is having a surplus of this stuff spilling over into your gut, that maybe that's doing a chemical peel internally as well, and maybe you're getting leaky gut, and maybe some of these things. So why haven't we heard of any of this stuff? Well, because it's starting to become a thing now, and it's not necessarily 100% because of the carotenoids and retinol, because we can in nature we can handle a little bit of this stuff, and it has a place, I think. But when you factor in some of these deficiencies that I mentioned before, and when you factor in the fact that we have massive spraying of pesticides and glyphosate, which exacerbate the situation, then it becomes an issue. So that's a modern thing again. A lot of these things that we discover along the way, it's because of modern day, elements like glyphosate, electromagnetic frequencies, and things like that. And I'm finding that with some of my clients, but mostly with Garrett has, his clients on a vitamin A detox, which is very simple. It's simple but complex at the same time. But the main thing is to eliminate vitamin A supplementation and eliminate most of the things that are extremely concentrated with vitamin A. And by just even the food. And when you start to eliminate some of these things, a lot of people start to get really good benefits. They start noticing their skin clears up. Some of their gut issues start to go away, and their autoimmune conditions, even with thyroid, starts to reduce big time. And the thing that I like about him is that he's tackled this thing looking at a lot of research and a lot of literature like I've never seen anybody do. So there's plenty of research and literature that he's dug up that at least is showing me to pay a little bit of attention to this thing.
That's fascinating, man. I feel like we could talk about this for hours. So many thoughts came up. I think I had like 30 things I wanted to go down different rabbit holes as we were talking. It's great though. I know. I'm sure you've seen fermented cod liver
like that.
It's great stuff,
fermented
man.
Cod liver oil. Yeah, well, the fermented cod liver oil or any fish oil has high concentrations of vitamin A. So there's that. Besides the PUFA, man, that's like a recipe for disaster. And I don't know if you've come across an article that talks a little bit about a couple of people from the Western Price Foundation that unfortunately, passed away from cancer and a few other issues way younger than they were supposed to. And they were doing a lot of fermented cod liver oil because, the Western Price Foundation, for a lot of the good things that they do, they're also big proponents of the fermented cod liver oil. And I always caution people with that, not only because of the yellow fat disease, But now with the stuff that I'm digging up related to vitamin A, those are two big red flags, man. And I think people should be very, very, very cautious with it.
Yeah, that's probably the top most toxic supplement I can imagine. But it's interesting the parallel between omega-3 lipofuscin accumulation, which you've looked into as well.
Oh yeah.
And the oxidation of iron and the oxidation of PUFA, and then they combine, they create this plastic lipofuscin, which accumulates in the liver, right? And then people are on a keto diet, they're vegans, they have no saturated fat, no glycogen, and then I guess just the liver and that state will just get packed full of vitamin A, right? Especially with a high carotenoid diet.
Yeah. Not only the diet, but it's coming. If you think about it, it's coming from a lot of places. You know, a lot of people who used to use things like Accutane for skin conditions, which Accutane is extremely loaded with things like retinoic acid, were getting these autoimmune side effects, and they couldn't make that connection. Now, if we go back to like the standard American diet and the industrialized food system, you see that there is a lot of synthetic vitamin A and vitamin D that gets put into processed foods. So that's giving the people who are just like on a regular diet, heavy concentrations of this stuff. And then, and if you start to look at things like nightshades like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants and things like that, these are foods that are very concentrated also in carotenoids. And that turn into that retinoic acid that creates an inflammatory reaction in your body. If you look at the modern diet world and the alternative nutrition and healthy world, where again, going back to eat the colors of the rainbow, if you start to see people who are eating massive amounts of salads, they're juicing kale and green vegetables to make the healthy juice, right? They're juicing orange carrot and into juice. You start to see, man, that's a lot of carotenoids, and it's like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't so crazy. Maybe there's something to that. If you eat a pizza, you got tomato sauce, you got cheese, you got gluten, and it's not the gluten, it's the glyphosate from the gluten that's exacerbating the retinoic acid. So you start to put the pieces together and you start going, man, I'm actually eating more carotenoids than I really thought, So there's something to this. There's definitely something to this. I've been looking at it for a little bit under, not in secret, but, doing my research with it. Dr. Smith is very vocal with it now, and he was very skeptical in the beginning because he used to, I'll tell you a quick story after I tell you, but he used to, in the hair tissue analysis, in the hair mineral analysis world, vitamin A as a supplement is often recommended to lower calcium, because when I see hair tissue analysis, like 85% of people are super high in calcium, which you don't want that. Remember, we were talking about calcification. You want a balanced calcium score in your hair tissue analysis. So a lot of times these hair tests come back and they're very high in calcium, low in potassium, low in magnesium. So magnesium is an antidote for calcification, but magnesium is also an antidote for vitamin A toxicity. But the standard process for one of the things that people would do or recommend in the hair mineral analysis world was to recommend vitamin A supplementation. And Garrett used to do that in the beginning. It turns out that the vitamin A, along with vitamin D, exacerbated calcium and made people worse before it just never made them better anyways. So I never took vitamin A as a supplement until I experimented with Garrett's work. So when I was introduced to Dr. Smith's work, I did a hair tissue analysis to learn the system and what he was doing, and for myself as well. And my calcium came up a little bit high because I've been working on calcium for a little bit, right? And he recommended vitamin A at that time. He recommended vitamin A supplementation because that's standard, right, for hair tissue analysis. And I was like, man, something in my gut went like, man, I don't know if I should take vitamin A. Just something in my gut said, I don't want to take this supplement. I took it anyways. And I experimented. And after a good, I don't know, man, it was maybe 2-3 weeks of taking it, I stopped. And then a few months later, he discovered the whole vitamin A and the retinoic acid, the stuff that we've been talking about. And he's like, everybody needs to stop vitamin A supplementation. He took all his clients off of it. I learned about it. And since I had already been off of it, I started to experiment with the whole low vitamin A diet. So I took all vitamin A sources out of my diet. I took, I never took supplements or anything on my skin. So skin creams, all these things are loaded. Sunscreen loaded with vitamin A and retinoic acid. So that's another one. But so I took everything out. I don't use sunscreen, just by the way, but I had to mention because that's in it. But I took it off, and all of a sudden I start getting blurred vision. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? And I'm getting this pressure in my head, like headaches. I've never, ever had headaches in my life, ever. So I called Dr. Smith, and I'm like, dude, I've never had blurred vision in my life, and I've never had headaches in my life. And it turns out one of the detox reactions for vitamin A toxicity when it starts to come out of your body is blurred vision, headaches, skin stuff coming out of your skin. And I was like, this makes sense, because I had been supplementing for 2 weeks with vitamin A supplementation, which is very concentrated. All of a sudden, I'm depleting my liver from excess stores of vitamin A, and this stuff's coming out. It's amazing. I detox pretty fast. Like I've throughout this whole journey of my of being in wellness and health, I've noticed that I've always been pretty quick about detoxing, and I noticed it right away, man. And that got my attention. That got my attention because that was something that had never happened to me. And my gut feeling on vitamin A was right at that time, and I had no idea what it was about, but I'm glad I stopped it. I'm glad I stopped it because it could have been worse. I could have had gut issues. My joints were starting to get a little bit like because it was exacerbating the calcium in my body. So I was feeling it a little bit in my joints, where they were creaking a little bit and they were getting a little stiff. And I'm like, dude, I do body work, I do magnesium. This doesn't make any sense. And it was the excess vitamin A that I was taking. So there's something to say about that. I'm still, I'm looking deep into it for sure, because it could be something that could be very helpful for a lot of people. Now, do you have to be on a no vitamin A diet for the rest of your life? No, not at all. And is it for everybody? No, it's not for everybody. Some people don't have vitamin A toxicity. Some people just by default, I'll give you another example, carnivore diet. Why is the carnivore diet so popular right now? And you get all these people like Jordan Peterson and what's the other guy?
Saladino.
Yeah, you get these guys, Sean Baker, and even Jordan Peterson's daughter is going, I've had autoimmune issues with my gut and this and that for years and years and years, and the only thing that's helped it is a carnivore diet. Well, what do you think the carnivore diet is missing? Vitamin A. Has no vitamin A. There's no vitamin A in beef. So if they're eating just beef and water and salt, guess what? They're like by default, they're on a vitamin A deficient diet. And they've been on it for probably more than 3 to 6 months, which usually that's usually where you see some of this stuff come out and some of the benefits come out. So, they're on this carnivore diet for 3 to 6 months. All of a sudden, their autoimmune issues disappear. You start to think, wow, is it really the carnivore diet? Or is it maybe they just took some of the poison out, and just by sheer luck and default, they just healed their gut? The thing with omega-3s. So it's interesting, man. It's it's caught my attention, and like I mentioned before we started, I've stopped for a long time. I've stopped looking at a lot of extreme, ideas and themes in the health field. And the ketogenic diet is the flavor of the month now. Before that, it was lectins. It was, Stephen Gundry's, the plant paradox diet. And that was the flavor of the month. Before that, there was something else, because there's always something, right? And I stopped like buying into these things a long time. I've always wanted to step away from it, but this vitamin A thing's gotten my attention. It's like one of the few things I've actually jumped into lately where I'm like, I'm going to take this thing serious. I take all the stuff regarding health very serious because I want to help people. But this is one of those things that has definitely caught my attention. Just like the yellow fat disease. I learned about yellow fat disease a few years ago from Adam Bergstrom and things like that. And that was the last thing before this that really, really caught my attention. And I was like, there's something to this. And the more I researched, the more I learned about, I read all Adam's books on it, not all of them because he has too many, but a lot of the things, and Ray Peat's information on polyunsaturated fatty acids and omega-3s and things like that. I was like, there is something to this. So, and it's fun. It's fun discovering new things, man. And when you start to make some of these connections with the polyunsaturated fats and the omega-3s with the potential of the retinoic acid and the vitamin A toxicity, with the EMF and how that interacts with both of those, because both of those interact with the light thing, with the non-native EMF, the blue light, the 5G coming up. Then you start to go, my God, this is like a perfect storm that we need to be aware of all of it. And we need to figure out ways and strategies around all of it. Because if we want to survive and thrive and evolve into this technologically based world that we're being basically pushed into, all these things come into play, all of it. So that's the thing I'm passionate about, is giving people all these tools, and they'll use some of them some of the time, they'll use some of them all of the time, and then we'll cycle in a couple things, and if we start with a really strong foundation, with turning all Wi-Fi off at night, wearing the blue blockers, drinking the best water you can drink, which your audience knows about it because you're so into it, man, we can adapt to this stuff, and we can make the best choices we can make for ourselves and our kids, and the generations, so yeah.
I agree, man. No, that was awesome stuff. It's interesting too, because people get so confused. You have neurosurgeons out there praising megadose DHA, megadose retinol specifically, like vegans, you're vitamin A deficient, whole posts on it, and then demonizing something like caffeine, which helps to basically decalcify the brain when it's combined with this resin called shilajit, right? And so it's really about understanding holistically what we're dealing with, and not getting pigeonholed, but always staying open, because the vitamin A stuff you shared is blowing my mind. So it's my understanding, like, beta carotene is super anti-thyroid, according to Ray Peat's work, and retinol from, say, butter or ghee or milk is a lot safer. It's a lot more pro-thyroid.
It is, especially butter. The milk could be something that needs a lot more, the actual milk itself, because the milk itself does have other factors that make the retinol pathway more pronounced in the liver. So it actually makes it so that it accumulates. What butter and ghee has in its favor is the butyric acid, and the butyric acid is known to offset the retinol, the effects of retinoic acid. So those are things that definitely should be considered when it comes to dairy. Dr. Smith says, you can get away with 2-3 tablespoons of heavy cream a day, and that usually has no issues with it. I think casein in the dairy has some effect in the process of retinol. So if you're already saturated with retinoic acid, it's like Dr. Smith uses the analogy of the bathtub, right? If you have a bathtub, which is your liver, and it's overflowing with water, and the water in this case is the retinoic acid, and it's overflowing, even one drop extra of water is going to keep making that water overflow and create that water damage on the floor and spillage and all that stuff. But once you drain that bathtub, or you drain the liver from the retinoic acid or the excess water, then the body can handle all the benefits from the grass-fed, let's say low temperature raw dairy and things like that, without having that concentration of vitamin A that comes from that food be an issue for people. So again, context. We started with context, and that's a huge thing, because if you already have somebody who's dealing with low thyroid, maybe an autoimmune disease, they have colitis or something where their colon is not up to speed, maybe dairy, even the highest quality milk, might be counterproductive because it's getting that bathtub to overflow. But once they go, let's say, on a 3-month program where they're just laying off of this stuff, of vitamin A, retinoic acid, the carotenoids and things like that, and they let their liver just squeeze that out, return to its proper functioning creating retinol binding protein that's going to flush that stuff out. And at the same time, we're getting the zinc deficiency under control. We're getting maybe some vitamin E naturally into the body, which counteracts vitamin A toxicity, by the way, which counteracts lipofuscin at the same time as well. Magnesium. When you start to do all this stuff and you turn that thing around, then you don't have to be like, so limited, just to for a lack of a better word. It's again context, right? Again, it's stages and things. Somebody like you, who it seems to me you're thriving with raw dairy and things like that, you probably don't have maybe an accumulation of vitamin A in your liver. There's ways of testing that and all that stuff. The testing for retinol and retinoic acid is not the best right now, because a lot of people who've done the whole research behind vitamin A and the history of vitamin A, which again, now it's questionable if it was even a vitamin at all. Just like vitamin D. Vitamin D is not really a vitamin, it's a hormone. So if people are supplemented with vitamin D, number one, it's exacerbating calcium in your body and it's making it go up. But then you're playing around with hormone therapy. You're playing around with hormone therapy. And then you start to think about, well, the body's supposed to make vitamin D. And there's different frequencies from the sun that come in contact with your skin that is complete different mechanism of creating vitamin D in your body than it is from an isolated vitamin D supplement, which is just one frequency and it's just one mechanism that is really hasn't panned out the way that people thought it was going to be. And then you start looking at the tests, and these tests are off the charts with what they're recommending that the blood markers for vitamin D should be. They're way higher than what they should be. And there's industry behind that, there's always industry behind something that, like fish oil again. It's big money, man. Fish oil, algae oil, all this stuff is big money. If you follow that, you start to ask the right questions. So,
for sure, yeah. Look at who's funding it.
Yeah, it's a wild world. It's a wild world for sure. But then you have guys like us, wild guys like us, man, who we're trying to just do the best we can to figure it out for people, and hopefully, we can help a ton of people wake up, because that at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. A lot of things we're seeing nowadays. I don't follow the news. I haven't seen CNN or any of that stuff, but by default, sometimes you get some of these news feeds on social media where you're seeing things that are very concerning. Addiction to cell phones, suicide rates going up, people having issues with obesity and diabetes and all this stuff. That a lot of it is just linked up to, again, glyphosate, pesticides, acid rain, improper, nutrition deficiencies and all this stuff. And I think part of, at least I can speak for myself, part of my job is to help people wake up. We can be healthy and we can turn this thing around. It's going to take a heck of an effort, but it's not just one person, we all have to do it kind of together. I made the mistake the other day of going into one of these Facebook groups, one of the holistic Facebook groups, the ones that alternative or whatever. A guy asked, "Hey, what food is good for lowering calcium and plaque in my arteries?" And I usually don't get myself into these Facebook groups, because a lot of times they're like, they attack you for something, and I'm not giving anybody advice, but I said, look, maybe you should consider asking a different question, because a food necessarily is not necessarily going to lower your calcium. There's no food that's going to do that. It's what you're taking out. So I said, what I would do if I was in your shoes. So now I'm not giving him advice. I'm not telling this person what to do. I just said what I would do if I was in your shoes is I would get rid of all fish oil and all omega fatty acids. I would get rid of all vitamin D. I would look into vitamin A and lower that significantly. I would start getting more magnesium, do a little bit of body work on myself, get hydrated, and your plaques should start to fix on its own, and little by little, you should see better result. Man, this guy out of nowhere comes in, it's like, that's the worst advice you could ever give him. Fish oil and vitamin D have been proven to show that they're good for the brain, that they're good for the heart, and they're good for this and that. And I'm like, man, I don't even know why I did that. I'm just trying to plant a seed to see if somebody can, get out of the box and think outside of that box, and maybe, approach it in a different way. Like I told you, I have 4 kids. My kids are smart, they're bright, they're healthy, they're robust. We never supplemented. She never supplemented when she was pregnant with any kind of DHA, any kind of prenatal, any of this stuff, fish oils, or any of this stuff. So if what they say is true about all mothers need fish oil and they need to supplement with DHA so the baby's brain grows bigger, it's not correct. I mean, that's just my opinion and what I've noticed. And something that I really love what Ray Peat says is, okay, where do they find the DHA in the brain of humans when they see like a cadaver or something like that? It's exactly. And or when the DHA starts to accumulate, but not in a baby's brain. When you do brains, scans of babies, they have very little DHA in them. Why is that? So then you start to think. Well, maybe we should start to think differently with this kind of thing. So, yeah, man.
So with vitamin D, I've been using like a vitamin D lamp. You can buy like, use it for 5 minutes or natural sunlight. That's a safe way to get your vitamin D. But you're saying supplementation, or if you already have, because some people say everyone's chronically deficient in vitamin D, right?
I think that's false. I don't think everybody's deficient in vitamin D. Now, if you ask Dr. Smith, he'll tell you most people have excessive amount of vitamin A, and that's what's bringing their vitamin D scores way down. So if he's right, then it's a simple fix. But yes, I think the farther you go from the equator, the more strategic you have to be about getting vitamin D from the sun. And if you don't, what you're doing is actually what I recommend people do. If I have clients that are, let's say, in New York or up north, I usually tell them you don't need a vitamin D supplement. Get as much sun as you can, but use UV light as your vitamin D supplement. And that's a super safe way because you're getting a mimic of what the sun offers you in these different frequencies from the UV light. And so then you're sending that light through your skin so that the body can biochemically create the vitamin D the way it's supposed to, not from a substance that, again, like I said, it's isolated. It's only one frequency of vitamin D. If you go outside in the sun, there's multiple frequencies of vitamin D that are coming through your skin. And that's a completely different mechanism of biochemical transmutation in the body for vitamin D. So as an alternative, sun lamps, UV lights, red light therapy helps with that as well. So the red lights, infrared lights help with that. That's what I would be exploring more than anything. And then, there's naturally occurring vitamin D in some foods. So between those things, you don't need to supplement. The supplement usually winds up hurting people more. And where you see it is when they go to the doctor and they're just looking at numbers and they go, well, your vitamin D is low, right? And it's an epidemic. Let's get it. Let's raise it up. Here's I don't know, whatever, 10,000 units a day or 10,000 units a week. Let's raise that vitamin D level. And they keep doing it. They go back, they take another blood sample and they go, it's not coming up. Okay, you need to take more. You need to keep going. By the time that they get to what's called the safe zone, where it could be 70, that's way too high. And that's usually when you notice people feeling completely trashed when they have that excessive amount of vitamin D, because now it's bypassed the tissues where it's accumulated enough in your tissues, and now it's coming into your blood. And now when it comes into your blood, that's when people start noticing super reactions, negative reactions to the vitamin D, because now your blood's saturated with it. But if you take the saturation from the blood and now it's in your tissues, and then your tissue flushes it out, then you don't feel the negative effects of the vitamin D excess. You don't feel the excessive amount of calcium anymore because you don't have that driving the calcium from your foods way into your gut and your tissues, and it doesn't become a problem. So most people who get excessive, negative reactions from vitamin D is when they just go crazy with the supplementation, and then they go to that point where it just feels awful. It feels really, really bad. So we're thinking long term.
What do you think about like mushrooms for D2, like chaga mushroom, or some people put mushrooms out in the sun to raise their vitamin D.
Look, I think that could help. I mean, I think mushrooms, they do absorb the vitamin D from the sun, and it's a really good way of capturing it. But like I said, man, I've looked enough into vitamin D to know that when they say, "Oh, this is an epidemic," there's usually something behind that, and the values, just like with cholesterol, right? Cholesterol used to be, the best cholesterol number used to be something, if I'm not mistaken, around what, like it was like 250 to 300, right?
Yeah.
That way back when, that used to be a really good cholesterol. Now, cholesterol, I don't want to get too much into it. You know that the particle size matters, the ratios between triglycerides, HDL, and this and that. But just for the sake of the argument of levels, right? That used to be the healthy level, around between like 230 to 300, right? All of a sudden, pharmaceuticals come in, and even like the vegan, let's just say the plant-based agenda or something like that comes in, and they go, no, 230 is way too high. Let's bump that down to like 180. Okay. Oh, no, 180 is still way too high, and they keep bumping it down. I think it's very similar with vitamin D. The ratios of vitamin D that they say it needs to be above, I think they say it needs to be above like 40. It's when you go over that 40 mark, I think that's when people start getting in trouble. I don't want to be misquoted because I don't have that research in front of me right now, but that's more or less the game that's played with that as well. So typically, wow. and you'll see it. You go on Chris Masterjohn's blog and things like that. They're actually starting. That's something that thankfully I'm noticing in the whole nutritionism world, is that a lot of these things, I think it was 5-6 years ago, vitamin D was the darling of the, everybody needed it. Even the paleo people were going, vitamin D, everybody needs to be on vitamin D, da 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 da. And now you see a lot of that is not being touted anymore. Resistant starch, that's another example. Everybody in the paleo community, primal community, everybody's saying resistant starch is the thing that we need so the butyric acid can, regrow the gut flora and this and that. Is anybody talking about resistant starch anymore? Not really. Why? Because it didn't work. It gave people a lot of flatulence. It gave people a lot of discomfort, and that wasn't a very good idea. So some of these ideas start to kind of fall out of vogue, and people, people be quiet. They get quiet about it really fast when it was a mistake. I think vitamin D was one of those mistakes.
I'm curious your thoughts on like grass-fed beef liver, because I recently started on it. I've only eaten it once, and I think desiccated is really easy to take. Yeah. But do you think for someone that's someone that doesn't have, or that's worked through the vitamin A or has a relatively well-functioning liver, can benefit from eating beef liver? Because I know there's B12, there's choline, there's vitamin E, there's also B complex. It's all sorts of really essential zinc, selenium, copper, amazing stuff in liver.
Yeah. In theory, you're right. There's a lot of nutrient density in liver. So again, context, right? So what do you do with liver? Grass-fed beef liver, really high quality or desiccated in a pill. Context. If you suspect that you have an autoimmune disease or skin or gut or anything like that, and this whole idea behind the retinoic acid and vitamin A thing is sounding a few bells, and it's making some sense, and you're like, maybe there's something to this, then that's one case where I would say let's forego the liver for a while, because liver does have a high concentration of retinol and vitamin A in it. It's in there. So that might not be a necessarily good idea. If you're okay and healthy, a little bit goes a long way. Now, I also go by my kids' reactions. If you try to give a kid a liver, even most adults won't eat liver because it tastes really bad. Even if you try to saute them with onions and try to flavor and all that stuff. To me, that could be an indication of something that it's either used as a medicine or as something to cycle in and out, as a supplement, as if it's necessary or something like that, because your body will tell you immediately. Your intuition will tell you, man, I don't know about this thing. And it could be toxicity of vitamin A, and your body could be going, I need to stay away from this. So again, it's context. And I don't usually do liver. All the other nutrients, amino acids and zinc and all these other things, I get them from other things. So
did you do bone broth?
Yeah, I do bone broth. Nice. Broth, shilajit. I a lot of like the grass-fed stuff that I get from the Amish farmers, they're pretty nutrient dense. I'm not too worried about it. Selenium I get from Brazil nuts, just 3 a day. That's all you need. So yeah, it's tricky, man. It really is. I'm not really a fan of liver right now. But it could be useful for somebody in certain cases, for sure. I think it's a medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, maybe, as Adam Bergstrom says.
Yes, no, maybe. Yep. Yes, no, maybe. I love that. Yeah.
Kind of a random question. This is kind of jumping way back, but cupping. Do you use cupping on your clients, or
I use it? Yeah. I use mostly gliding cupping. Gliding cupping is a form of getting the superficial fascia, which is the fascia that's kind of under the skin, to basically move with the suction. And man, for circulation, it's amazing. Also for skin health, it really makes the skin beautiful and young and all that. And there's sometimes where I see a little bit of resistance in my clients where I'll leave the cup for a long period of time, because usually the idea behind the cupping is that the blood flow in that area where it gets either purple or red has been stagnant for quite a while. And cupping is a really good method of getting that blood to the area in a really fast way. So it'll flush out metabolites and things that need to be moved out of that area very effectively. So yeah, man, I like cupping. I think there's some good benefits to it. There you go. You're set. Do it. It's kind of like, it's very similar to gua sha, mm-hmm. but it has a different mechanism, right? Gua sha is more on the skin and you can scrape the skin. The cupping, I think it goes a little bit more into the inner lining of the skin. So that superficial fascia, it hydrates your body really well too. So I like it. Awesome. I like it a lot. I use it for sure.
Awesome. Do you do inversions like on a swing?
I do it on the swing. Yeah. On the home gym. I love those. I've been meaning to get the traction one, the one that you have mm-hmm. with the pump. Mm-hmm. Man, there's a couple things I've been meaning to get, but it's always the kids first, right? That's the hierarchy here in my house. The kids, whatever they need first, food and all the other stuff to keep us healthy, and then I get to whatever's left over. I get to invest in my research and myself and optimization. So, hopefully the abundance keeps building, and I can invest more in those educational things. But I think that traction, I think that traction thing is amazing.
Yeah, I recently saw one of my biggest mentors, Dr. Cass Ingram, at an expo, and master osteopath, and I had my friend with me that's dealing with chronic Lyme disease, and him and his partner, and he just looked at them and he's like, "You guys need manual work," and I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't get with vitamin A toxicity, lipofuscin, all these things. No matter what it is, right? We need that manual movement to get those toxins out, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It goes hand in hand for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a great interview with Kaz Ingram. I liked it.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I love his charge. So
his energy is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I'll have to have you back on because I feel like we could have gone so deep into a bunch of stuff, but really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge. And
hey, my pleasure. And hey, if you're interested in going deeper into the vitamin A, and you want to have Dr. Smith on, I think that'd be a really good episode for you. I think that'd be freaking great, because I know enough about it, but man, this guy, when it comes to that, he'll blow your brain like big time. The connections he's making with this stuff. So if you want to set that up, I could totally set that up for you if you want. He's great.
I appreciate
He's a good guy. He's a good guy for sure.
Thanks, man. That would be awesome. Well, you're like me. You're a jack of all trades. So we're like we spread, instead of getting hyper focused. But there's a place for everyone,
Exactly. You just hit it right, the nail right on. Yeah. And that's what I like. I like being this way, because I get to meet a lot of people where they are, so I can, I don't have to be hyper focused on something and just limit it to one thing, keeps my life interesting too.
Yeah. And it's not all about food. You and I both agree on that. And context and lower stress, right?
Yeah. Context diet.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to wait for that book.
Yeah, maybe I should write it. Cool, man. Cool.
Is your website schotthealth.com?
Schotthealth.com, yeah. Schotthealth.com.
Okay.
2 T's.
Oh, 2 T's. Okay.
Yeah. SCHOTT, the word health.com. That's my last name. Schotthealth.com. So you can find some stuff there. I'm upgrading that website. Probably by the time you air this guy, it'll be upgraded. There's a lot of stuff there about the vitamin A, but there's a lot of stuff about me and my coaching. And I'll have my wellness awareness guide there, so people can download it and enjoy that, because that's a pretty good entry point to the way I see things when it comes to wellness. It's pretty cool. So. You can put it up when, I'll probably start putting some stuff on Instagram about it and all that. I need to start getting a little bit more active on Instagram, posting more things and all that. But with 4 kids, man, it's full on over here. And
we didn't even get into family health, which you're an expert on and all that. So.
Yeah. If you ever want to do one just on that, I'll be super happy to do it, because there's a lot there on educating kids on the whole element of vaccines, circumcision, rites of passage, man, it's keeping your kids healthy. I mean, my kids maybe you'll meet them one day, but they know what GMOs are. They know what electromagnetic frequencies are. They know how to, I'll get them blue blockers and stuff like that, because they'll watch movies with us sometimes. But they're amazing. And the way we're raising them, I'm very happy. I'm not perfect. We're learning a lot from being parents, but I think my kids are pretty fortunate, because they have a lot of things going for them that at least I didn't, and so. Yeah, we can do a whole show on kids for sure.
Yeah, I would love that. Inspiring, man.
Yeah.
What's your Instagram too? It's your full name, right? John Alexander.
John Alexander Schott. Yeah.
Schott. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why I did that, but maybe I should change it to Schott Health. It's one of those things, but yeah, it's under John Alexander Schott. But maybe we can tag it or something, and we can do the whole.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
it's like an action hero name. I love it. It's
yeah.
Like John Wick or something.
Yeah, I know. Cool.
Well, awesome, man. Well, thanks so much, and we'll be in touch. Hang on while we close out the show. Thanks for coming on.
Having me, brother. Thank you, man. It was a blast.
That was a lot of info. I love how John is like a jack of all trades. I'm kind of the same way, looking into calcification, advanced glycation end products, the toxicity of omega-3 fatty acids, and the resulting lipofuscin that will inevitably form. And I really found it interesting, the relationship between lipofuscin and the liver and potential vitamin A toxicity. And John mentioned that retinol binding protein. The liver makes a lot of proteins, does over 500 functions, but it actually helps make iron bioavailable, copper bioavailable. It creates a lot of different things. It's not just a detoxification organ. It actually allows our minerals to work, which then allow thousands of enzymes to work. So the body is truly a system of systems, and it's very fascinating. And that just speaks to the importance of helping the liver and not hammering it with unsaturated fatty acids, which cause non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or cirrhosis of the liver, these age pigments that accumulate all throughout the body, but mostly the liver. Because when we have all of these in the liver, when we have a lot of lipofuscin, a lot of omega-3s stored there, then our liver actually can't detoxify not only itself, but the entire body. It's just struggling to work because it can't generate ATP. All the cells in the liver are being bogged down by these unsaturated fats. So I'm finding that when the cell metabolism shifts from the oxidation of sugar to the oxidation of these free fatty acids via the Randle cycle, that's where we see a lot of the issues happen with lactic acid production in excess, and that's a very inefficient and destructive way of generating ATP. So really interesting stuff. I am definitely going to look into this vitamin A rabbit hole. I think there's something there, and not a lot of people are talking about it, so it's really interesting. Check out John's website. I'll put the link below, but it's schotthealth.com. That's SCHOTT health.com. You can also check out my website, matt-blackburn.com, where I share all of my recommended products, and my personal brand, which is mitolife.co. And I'm continually coming out with new products under that line. Really excited for future products to share with you guys. I have several in the works right now. So really appreciate you guys supporting the show. If you like it, subscribe, leave me a nice review. I would really appreciate that. Today's quote is by Thomas Myers. Fascia is the biological fabric that holds us together, the connective tissue network. You are about 70 trillion cells, neurons, muscle cells, epithelia, all humming in relative harmony. Fascia is the 3D spiderweb of fibrous, gluey, and wet proteins that bind them all together in their proper placement. Our biomechanical regulatory system is highly complex and understudied, though new research is filling in the gap. Understanding fascia is essential to the dance between stability and movement, crucial in high performance, central in recovery from injury and disability, and ever present in our daily life, from our embryological beginnings to the last breath we take.